and welcome back to the channel. Today you join me in Birmingham and more specifically at BMW Hams Hall, which is their engine producing facility in the UK. They basically build the 3-cylinder and 4-cylinder engines here, which you've probably seen in the i8 and also the Mini and 320 and 330i engines. It's absolutely amazing to see the factory. We got to see how it worked, but we weren't able to film anything. The level of automation is amazing, and they pump out an engine almost every 28 seconds. But today we are here to check out this car. If you subscribe to the channel, you would have seen us do a walk around of this car at BMW UK a couple of months ago. So this video is not going to be looking at the design elements of this car. If you want to look at that, we'll put a link here so you can check that out. What we're really here to do is drive the car and see how it performs on the road. Weather is typical UK, it's raining today, so we'll get to work the xDrive system. Let's jump in the car and see what it's like to drive. You join me back in the car. I have been driving it for around 2.5 hours and done 150 miles. I've got a decent idea of what it's like. This review is not going to be about the interior and the features of the car. We have covered the interior in our previous video, which you can take a look at, and I'll let other people show you how much room there is in the glove box and things like that. I'm more interested in how the car drives. So in comfort mode, it's very comfortable, very compliant. You could easily commute in this car. One thing I'm impressed with is the fact that even though it's all black in this interior, it's still quite bright and airy, and I think that's to do with the front windscreen. It's got quite a big rake, so it's a lot of surface area and lots of light in, despite the fact that the side mirrors are quite narrow. But yeah, this is a typical B road. We're still in comfort mode. It's very comfortable. It's handling the bumps and the compressions in the road really well. So this is the mode that you'd be driving in just on your normal commute. You can feel when you're going into the corners, it's got a slight bit of body roll, but nothing too untoward. So this is a car that does have two different personalities. So I'm just cruising along here. I could be on my commute to work. It's very comfortable. It's a nice place to be. The interior's very slick. I really like the high transmission tunnel here because you feel like you're in a cockpit. Brakes feel very progressive. It's very wet today. It's been raining all day, but in some ways that's been a good thing because it's allowed me to see how good the xDrive system is, and I can report it is very good. So when I'm going to go back on this road, I'll put it into Sport Plus mode, and now that has changed the damper settings to the stiffer setting. It has 3 different settings for the engine and the gearbox. So the gearbox is now in its faster setting. I can go to manual just by switching over to the paddles. It's got plenty of grip, and the xDrive works like it works in the G80, so it still feels very rear-wheel drive, and it gives you the front-wheel drive when it feels like it's losing grip, so it still feels very BMW. They've programmed something into these gear shifts when you go into Sport Plus, and it's almost like a DCT thud. I don't know how they've done it, but you can definitely feel a difference, and it's got a different noise, so almost like on a DCT or DSG gearbox when you get that upshift boomy noise. I don't know how to describe it, but it's pretty cool. It's very snappy as well, so on the downshifts it doesn't feel like a torque converter gearbox, but you'll hear it now on the upshift. So even in sport mode, the dampers in the hardest setting, it's still very compliant. This road is not the smoothest like we're used to seeing in this country, and it just glides over them. And I know a lot of that sound might be manufactured, that you're hearing through the speakers, and that's just the way it is now with CATs and OPFs in place. We're not going to go back to the old days of beautiful sounding engines, but from inside at least it sounds good. and as you can see, it's very wet. I'm able to make a lot of progress, and I can report that it's still fun. Even though it's four-wheel drive, it still feels rear biased. And the driving I've been in today, the roads have been fairly soaking, and the traction hasn't actually kicked in that much until I've gone onto a greasy road surface rather than a wet road surface. Turns in really well. Just inspires a lot of confidence even in these conditions. I don't think I'd be able to drive the F87 M2 as fast as I can this car, especially in these conditions. And I think for the UK, that's going to be a good thing. It's really going to be interesting to see how many people are actually happy with this M240i rather than the new M2 that's coming out, because that obviously will be rear-wheel drive. So with the traction on, it's very confidence inspiring and safe. And if you want that little bit more of edge, you can put it into sport traction mode, which just allows a little bit of slip, and it's quite intuitive, just makes it feel a little bit more edgy, which is not a bad thing, especially when you're used to rear wheel drive. I was worried when they were getting xDrive in this that it would feel more like an Audi, but it doesn't at all. It's still exciting, and you can still make progress in wet conditions. So this is a quantum leap up from the old 2 M40i, and the main reason for that is that this is actually based on the 3 Series, and the old 2 Series was based on the 1 Series. So it's already started with a higher model and just brought it down into the 2 rather than stepping the 1 up into the 2. And it tells. The car rides really well, it handles amazingly. I was really impressed with the M340i and 440i, and this in a short wheelbase is just a more exciting and sporty package, as you would expect. So yeah, just it's still fun. That's the main thing. Still feels like a BMW, brakes really well. I mean, there's no way I'd be able to drive the rear wheel drive cars on this road the way I'm driving this car. I'm really impressed with it. In terms of what it's going to be like to live with, I'll be able to report that once we get our car. It has been delayed quite a bit. I'm not sure when we're going to get it, but as soon as we do, I'll start using it more and we can let you know what the car is like to live with. But it's fun. It's got traditional BMW looks, traditional BMW layout in terms of the fact that it is rear-wheel drive bias, even though it does have xDrive. But yeah, it's just BMW through and through. Much like the G80, I am very impressed with the chassis and the way the car rides. This is in sport, it's still compliant over these roads and still very flat through the corners. Lots of feedback from the chassis, I can feel what's going on. And then when you get into traffic like this, you stick it back into comfort, put it into D and just cruise. What more could you ask for? As I said, this car does have 2 distinct personalities and both of them are very capable. So you join us back at the BMW plant, and as you can see, the car is now very dirty. We've been driving it around for 4 hours and I've been mightily impressed by this little machine. We all know that the B58 engine is a very strong power plant, and in this car it delivers 374 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque, and will do 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds. But what's more impressive to me is in the way this car delivers and handles that power. Being xDrive, it's still rear wheel bias, so it feels like a BMW, but then gives you the safety net of the xDrive, and the front wheels will kick in where it needs to. Tie that in with the limited slip diff and the chassis, you can really tell that M have had a hand in this car. On the previous M-Lite cars, they felt like M-Lite cars. This one feels much closer to M-Power than we have actually seen in what you would regard as an M-Lite. I don't actually think it's fair to call this an M-Lite now. It kind of sits really in between the M-Lites and M. What's going to be really interesting is when the new M2 comes out, because that's going to be rear-wheel drive and this is going to be four-wheel drive. So it's going to be a case of how much you can use the M2's power. And I'm actually looking forward to receiving our M2 and then doing a comparison video with this. As you know, we do have one of these on order, and when that arrives, we'll be able to give you our longer term views on this car. But overall, I'm very impressed with it, and it almost feels like a mini G80 M3. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please remember to subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on. If you want to join the conversation, please drop us a comment below and we will do our best to respond to you. And if you're running out of things to watch, why don't you watch one of these two?